Okay, this is the Project Review Board meeting for Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. The first item on our agenda tonight is an information exchange, and I'll turn it over to Caroline.
Sure, so we don't have any staff approvals. The planning board has continued their talk about parking requirements for multifamily housing projects in the Village Commercial 1 zone. They're gonna have a public hearing on that next month. They were also talking about adding a new definition to the zoning ordinance regarding increase in nonconformity. That goes along with some work they had done a few months ago regarding the ability to add on or expand a nonconforming structure. I gave him your comments on section 602, limited to the sign and keeping the square footage as proposed. We sent that out for legal review. The town attorney actually had some comments to existing language that was in there, but we should look at updating. So we're not going to go to public hearing on that quite yet. We're going to go, they're probably going to hold off a month on that. Sure, and then they're also continuing to talk about cannabis at the request of the council, the specific uses of cannabis manufacturing and processing and cannabis cultivation. They have 6 zones, I believe, that they've narrowed it down to, so they sent notices out for public meeting. That's still in draft form. They would still have to do more language, but they've narrowed down some areas that they feel like it would be most appropriate, so they'll continue to talk about that. And then we haven't had a meeting, another one yet, of the Downtown Vision Task Force. That will be next week, so I'll have an update on that at the next meeting.
Okay, thanks. The next item on our agenda tonight is the review of the minutes from the June 15th meeting. Are there any comments or questions about those minutes? None? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion to approve minutes as written of the June 15th meeting.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and seconded by Ford. We have to do a roll call vote because we are in hybrid mode today. Jason hanging out on the internet. All right. Berger?
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Montleone?
Yes?
Did I say it right? All right.
I think he wasn't there.
I wasn't there.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
abstain.
Stay, okay.
Reike?
Yes.
Yankee?
Yes.
Donahue?
Yes.
Present. Okay,
Person.
right. It's unanimous. Thank you, Sharon. Next item on our agenda tonight are the reviews. And the first one is the Freeport Crossing Apartments multiple family dwelling. And I'll turn it over to Caroline for a brief overview.
Sorry, I just needed to
Okay.
catch up on the minutes there. So this is a conceptual presentation for a multifamily housing project. The lot is located on the abutting lot to Town Hall. Used to have 2 houses on it years ago. I'm also dating myself quite a bit now. It's been vacant for years. It has the stone wall and the rock sculptures. The applicant is presenting plans for, it would actually be condos. To us, it's still multifamily housing project. It has 25 units. It would trigger design review, site plan review, and subdivision review. You, of course, do all 3 of those reviews at the same time. Of the 3 review processes that you guys do, as we talked about last month with another housing project, the one with the most steps at this point would be subdivision. Our subdivision ordinance wasn't really designed for these type of projects. The first step is the conceptual review. That's where the board looks at the inventory and analysis plan for the site and determines typically if the development's in the right space and the open space is in the right area. In this case, as with the last downtown project you saw, they don't have an open space requirement. They go through, they calculate the net residential acreage, they identify any environmentally sensitive areas, but they don't have to put some aside in open space. If you read through the staff report, you'll see there's, no steep slopes. There are some wetlands on the site. We did ask for some questions on the wetlands. We have a very specific definition as to what they need to deduct, therefore what they would need to avoid. It's conceptual, so I'm sure we'll get a wetlands report at one point, but that's something that we did flag. They would connect to public utilities. They are proposing some parking on site If they need additional parking, their intent would be to get it off-site. Again, it's in the downtown area. The planning board also continues to talk about parking. So I think that is TBD. The site currently has multiple entrances off of West Street and Main Street. They are proposing to close the entrance exit off of Main Street, so it would be coming in one way from West Street. They currently have an agreement to exit over the town lot. If you've ever noticed, there's kind of a little gravel connector there. That's been in place for years. They have approached the town manager and be going to the town council to see if they can get that formalized as an easement. Something to be aware of at this point, but the details of that aren't under the purview of the board. The renderings don't show that current stone wall, but their intent is to retain the current stone wall that's there and repair it to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, along the front, they do show some entrances to the building. So again, subdivision, this would be conceptual review. You can give them any comments on the site, and then there are some conceptual building renderings if you have feedback for them on the design review aspect. I don't know if the board wants to maybe schedule a site walk. We can get through the conversation and then see what you want to do there. As with the last one, if you feel like they have the building set in the right way, you could take action on the conceptual phase, or you could put that off until you feel that you have the information you need. The applicant's team is here, so I will turn off my Zoom sharing and let them give you the information.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. I'll turn it over to the applicants.
Hi, I'm Paul Peck. I live in North Yarmouth. I am an attorney, but I'm also a developer. Not a giant developer, but I do a project every few years. Finishing up a project right now in Yarmouth. I have done work in Cumberland and assisted living, in Scarborough, in Portland, up in Carabasset Valley, and I'm excited to be here. I got introduced to the site originally by David Mosier, who owns, the Mosiers own the site. He knew I was interested in urban suburban development and contacted me to talk to him about the site. We ended up reaching an agreement on purchasing the site, and the Mosiers have been great to work with. I'm very interested in walkable neighborhoods and walkable developments, human scale. I've been following your visioning for the downtown, and I think it's wonderful. Clearly, our state needs housing, and you've identified that the village needs housing, and we want to bring some housing next door. The big vision is to really engage with the street, this building, and we've done that through entrances on the first level has entrances to the residents' homes. So that's sort of cool in the sense that they'll be able to walk into Main Street from their residences. Our higher up residences, our second and third floor, we anticipate that they'll all have porches and balconies to engage with the street and engage with the outside. We think it's a fantastic site. It's walkable. It's the train station, the bus station, what the town has to offer. It's a cool time for the town. Obviously, you all know that, and I think that in the sense of moving away a little bit from the national retailers to more of a hometown downtown, and bringing residents to those businesses and to all the activities here with the different civic organizations close by. It's just a fantastic site. We're really excited about it. I'm here today with our architect and our engineering teams. I know this meeting's a little bit limited, but we wanted to bring the team out. We wanted to show you what we were thinking about, just to get as much feedback as we could, as early as we could. So as we move through this process, we'll be better prepared to bring you more for the preliminary hearing and the final hearings. So I'm here with Eric Duby of Trillium Engineers there in Yarmouth, Caleb Johnson Studios of Portland, and they'll walk you through the project, and we'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, he's getting hooked up. I'll just let you guys know. I put a couple letters. I emailed them to you today that came in regarding housing. It's mostly regarding affordable housing, which we don't have a standard, but everyone had a copy in front of them in addition to what got emailed out earlier.
All right, thank you very much. So I am Eric Doobie with Trillium Engineering Group. I'm a civil site engineer, also a structural engineer. Happy to work with Paul and Caleb Johnson Studios. We've been working with Caleb Johnson for a while, and certainly this is a good project that Paul introduced us to. So what we've got here is just a typical boundary survey that shows some physical features with some ledge, some existing drainage, some of it which comes from the town, and then of course some rock walls, and then we have the old parking area for the two buildings that we had, and the entrance off of Main Street. There currently is no entrance off of West Street, but that's where we are proposing on that. So essentially we got some, again, some physical features shown here. Next slide, if you don't mind on that, Josh. So this is our site inventory and analysis sketch plan where we go through the calculations. We have our general notes, and again, we're showing a little more features on this and going through those calculations that were really asked for this. But a lot of them, as Caroline said, don't really apply for this particular as far as open space. So next slide, please. So what we're showing here is essentially the building, and we have the street presence that Paul was talking about. We are meeting the setbacks on the town hall side and the setbacks on the West Street side. Of course, we're meeting the setbacks on the on Main Street side. We have some good connection points that go out to the sidewalk on Main Street, and we're also trying to get some connection point out to West Street. We have our main entrance on this kind of the front corner down here, which is down in this section here, which we're trying to get a ramp, integrate that with the existing stone wall, and get access into our main lobby area. We also have the internal parking area and courtyard that is not really, you can't see that from either West Street or from Main Street. We're trying to hide that. And of course, we have a sloping site, so we have everything level that's up on Main Street. And then it slopes as we come down, and we have kind of a daylight basement section that has here with an extra unit, and also some bike storage, some mechanical space. We are utilizing some entrance points on the courtyard side, which is kind of the main entrance lobby area, and also to this portion of the building. This section of the building, which faces Town Hall, is essentially we're utilizing tandem parking, which is underneath this section, and then we're utilizing units on top of that. So the units essentially wrap on the three sides that surround from West Street, Town Hall, and from Main Street. The one-way access that we were talking about, we noticed in the report from Town Engineer Adam Bliss that an entrance permit required. We've already secured that entrance permit, so we're in good shape there. Takes traffic away from Main Street, which is more congested than West Street, and it's really one-way traffic, which really helps us out as far as stacking, and we don't have to worry about interfering with the light as much. It's really a left turn in, that's our biggest concern, but otherwise than that, it's a right turn in for entrance, and then we go through that easement section that we're talking about, and be able to exit down and through the way we exit out Town Hall as we currently exist. We do have parking and then some trash storage on this side, so that it's pull in and then back out and then be able to pull in. We have some slopes here, and then we are going to, as we noted, we need some stormwater quantity and quality, so we're going to utilize some basically underground storage under parking and be able to connect into the town system. We're not going to release at rates that are over what they are now. We're going to discharge at the same or less rates than what we're looking at, and we are going to get treatment from that system. We are doing utility connections essentially from West Street, water, sewer, electrical, and then of course we're gonna continue to work on landscaping for the project to meet those landscaping goals. So from a site civil impact, I think that kind of covers it. I'm going to turn it over to the architectural team. There you go. It's on.
Evening, everybody. My name is Caleb Johnson, representing Caleb Johnson Studios, and Paul Peck, the developer. Definitely agree with Paul. This is a really fun site for us all. I think many of you know the site better than I do, but a couple things I'll note from an urban standpoint. It's a corner lot, and it's the first corner lot that really begins to form the street wall that we all know as Main Street, making it a pretty important corner. This view is close up, looking down Main Street to the north. And it's a view that you would see from your cars, and it's a view that you would see from the all-important thing that Paul mentioned. We appreciate his commitment to walkable neighborhoods and dense urban cities as well, and that's what we're really emphasizing here, because this is the way you'll feel it. You will get some long views of it, but this is why we start here. So from an urban standpoint and from an urban design, which I have background in, that street wall is all important in holding a corner. As well as it turns out that at this site, this really kind of marks an entry. And so we're trying to be very careful with that. There's a trick that could happen. Well, there's a maybe, in my opinion, a hole we could fall into really quickly of emulating too much a historic downtown, and then it starts to kind of become corny and faux. Or we could go to the other side, and it starts to become like too modern and stand out like a sore thumb. We're looking for a balance here, and we feel like we're on our way. These are very beginning images. The balance that we're striking here really has to do with not just building a long wall. And you will find a lot of 19th century buildings like this around Maine that are apartment buildings, right? They might be clad a little different. They might have a lot more ornamentation on them, but they have bays sticking out. The roof lines jog in and out. And you can begin to see that we're, in your ordinance, you rightly call out that you're looking for rhythm. And architecture certainly has a lot to do with rhythm. And so that's what we're beginning to show here. Let's hit the next slide, Josh. So here you can see that rhythm a little bit better, where we have, kind of major facades that come out. Currently, we're coloring those in like a deep, rich red. Extremely hard to get colors on a rendering from screen to screen to screen. So all we can say is that's a work in progress, but of note, we're standing in a red building, and I think it's a pretty successful red building. And this is our current favorite coloration, but there's plenty more discussion. So here, illustrating the rhythm, the breaking of the facade, the in and out movement of the roof line. If that tall roof line, and I will say it's not that tall, it's 32 feet. So most of your homes are probably somewhere between 30 and 35 feet. And this building tops out at 32 feet. So it's not that tall. It is a 3-story building, and it's under scale with many of the buildings on this street and about the same scale as many. So we're right in the middle. Josh, next slide. Now this one is looking down West Street. You can see that, it's between 6 and 8 foot fall by the time you get to the entry, which is right over in this region. And so this addresses the fire station and what, on your master plan anyway, is proposed as a public park. So it's an important entry. Also, and I'm not sure if we have an image in here, but you'll notice as you walk the site and look at the site, as you travel south, there is, you can look through the beautiful parking lot. There's been a lot of discussion. I'm not sure of a nicer parking lot than the parking lot of City Hall in Freeport. And so we do have a facade looking at that, and it's a great amenity for this development, which is on the opposite side. Next slide, Josh. So that's a good view that you would get if you were standing across the street. Most of the time you'll get a little up closer view. Heading down West Street, heading north along Main Street. Again, I think this is a good view. You rarely see a building dead on like you see in architectural elevations. That's really an abstraction. Most of the time you see them in what we would call an oblique view, just looking at it at an angle. And so this is a really telling image in that, especially down West Street, you can, because we're looking at it very obliquely, you can see that we've worked hard to make sure we don't just get a big building block that could look overly institutional, which we're trying to avoid. We can talk a bit about the materials here and the fenestration or the window and door patterns. We are intending to use a composite cement panel that is very close to just traditional wood. As a matter of fact, unless you go up and put your fingers on it or are an expert, you might not tell the difference between wood and cementitious clapboards. And on the lower part, we would have a cove siding. Some of the siding on the bays will be a panelized cementitious siding. But also maybe hard to see in the rendering, there's a lot of texture on this facade. And we'll probably, as time goes on, we'll probably add texture to the building versus take it away. Texture on a building tends to break down the scale of it. And it will also relate well to the traditional buildings which have texture, a lot of texture on them. I think it's an important note that Freeport itself has a really nice blend of very contemporary buildings and very traditional buildings, and so I appreciate that about Freeport, especially the entrance coming north. You know, there's some really nice buildings, and El Obin is clearly doing quite the contemporary building, and this is a nice transition into. I would call this a transitional building in that it's almost traditional. But we haven't really clad it in a very traditional way, but the building massing and planning itself is quite traditional. Let's hit the next slide. So this is looking south, correct, Josh? Yeah, so we're looking south there. So if you were leaving El Obin and heading to the fire station, you can see that in the distance. And also a really good view of how it would address Town Hall, and a really good view of how we've broken up the massing. So you almost feel like you have three buildings there when you're driving down the street. Next slide. So we are aware that in your ordinance you prefer to use something like a Benjamin Moore or a historic color palette. We're happy to do that. It makes life easier on us. We are by no means to the color selection phase yet, but we will comply with that without any issue. Next slide. This should different. This is all in all gray, and we can have plenty of discussions as to what looks better, all gray. You know, like one of my favorite buildings is the Abacus building. It's brilliant white. I pictured that on this site, and that'll hit you in the face really hard. And I'm thinking it might be a little bit better muted versus just being very foreground. White comes to the front, darker colors recede. And this is in urban, from an urban standpoint, this is a background building where a city hall or an L.O. Bean is a foreground building. So I'm thinking put some background colors on it that help it recede. Plenty more discussion to come about that. Next slide. Here's a study of what else is on the street. You can see historic flat roof buildings of 2 stories. We do have some, I believe, historic flat roof buildings of 3. You can see pitch roof buildings. You can see these darker colors. This building, which I don't know if that might be where Levi's was. I'm not sure what's there now. That has the kind of tonality that I picture, where it kind of fades to the back a little bit. You know, easy to make it look too dark on the screen, but that's something similar. So we've been studying the different facades and how that will relate to this. Next slide. And here's just an analysis, an architectural analysis of how we develop rhythm, how we develop the different types of fenestration, what's forward, what's back, how we break up the facades. So we are in that process. Feedback from everybody will help us to continue that process and make sure we're delivering a building that enhances and really goes along the main street the best we can. Let's might be our last slide. Is that it, Josh?
This is last slide.
Last right here. Yeah, so this is just from your own master plan showing the building, an L-shaped building, addressing a park, and we're aware of that and being careful of. It's an interesting building in that there's only one facade that's really almost invisible from the street. 3 other facades of the building will be quite visible. So that's an interesting aspect of the building that I think just makes it more fun. So that's it. And I'm assuming we're opening it up to comments.
We'll look to the chair for that.
I think we'll have some questions and comments. We'll start with the board. I think what we'll do is similar to how we dealt with the last multi-unit project last month. Because there are 3 different reviews, subdivision, site plan, and design review, we'll go through each one, ask questions related to that one before moving on to the next. So we'll start with subdivision, and I'll start with the board here, and then we can ask Jason in hybrid mode if he has any comments. So questions or comments with regard to subdivision ordinance?
With respect to concept.
Concept, exactly, with respect to the concept. Nothing. Does Jason have any questions or comments with regard to subdivision?
No question with regard to
No questions
Nope.
from Jason on subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Conceptual.
Okay, any questions or comments with regard to the site plan?
I have one question.
Yep, go ahead.
The area of the wetlands that's on the existing conditions, that is going to be covered pretty much by the parking that on that southwestern side, I guess, on West Street? That's what you're planning to do? To take that out, or?
Yeah, I'll let Eric, our civil engineer, remark on that.
Is this microphone working too?
That microphone should be working, yes.
So, yeah, the questions that we're really talking about are from, actually, it's funny, there's a drainage system that happens basically from this catch basin, which is from the town parking lot. So what we're really talking about is runoff that's created from that culvert. And then it connects into the culvert that drains out of West Street. So when we're talking about wetlands, we're not talking about significant wetlands. We're just talking about wetlands that are created from a drainage way or drainage swale. So, but those will, to answer your question, those will be covered by parking area and slopes.
Right, so without me having, I don't believe you have a picture of that area that's adjacent to the town hall parking that comes out on West Street. Is that correct? This is going to be where on what am I looking at? S1A1, where it says existing paved parking area. That, I believe, is one of the town hall parking. Is
Yeah,
that
it's not owned by the town, it's actually privately owned, but it's
but-
that lower lot on the side, it's that area abutting that,
Okay,
yes.
so from that area to the property line, that's where all that heavy tree growth is right now that you can see when you go down West Street?
Yes.
So I would be interested in having a better look at what's there. I have never kind of been in that area myself on foot or anything. So I'd like to understand what's there because it seems like you'll be removing or redoing what's that existing wetlands or treed area, and I'd like to understand what it is as far as where the parking and your drainage and all is changing.
Correct. Yeah, there's lower shrubs and other kind of just unmaintained bushes and trees and things like that that have grown up in that area. We can cover that on our site walk specifically. Love to walk through that and do that. But we would also be replanting that entire slope and area too with
Okay.
this development.
Okay, and then I have one other question, that it has to do with the traffic on West Street and access. Is that something
Sure.
I can ask at part of this? Okay. So, from my own personal experience, coming down West Street from Main Street, well, put it this way, going up West Street to Main Street, it very often can get pretty backed up going down West Street. And I would be interested in actually understanding that traffic flow and people coming from Main Street going down West Street and making a left turn. And that whole intersection there seems like it could be an issue of cars getting backed up, or if they got backed up from the traffic coming from Main Street to West Street, if that was going to interfere and go backed up towards Main Street and interfere with the Main Street traffic. I don't know if this is something we can ask for a better traffic study at the time when this happens. It's something that I'm interested in understanding.
So what we would propose is similar to what they have in Brunswick at a couple different intersections, specifically on Route 1. So you provide some striping.
He'd like you to hold that.
Oh, sorry. We would provide some striping, and then with signage saying do not block intersection, so that you could allow cars to be able to take that one left turn. So,
Okay. Is there any reason to request a traffic study? I don't know if it's obviously not at conceptual, but
I believe the entrance permit for that has been approved by Public Works, but yeah, we would look at the traffic as we get further along in the process. I think you can flag it for them. Would also want to have our town engineer weigh in on it.
okay, thank you.
thank you.
As to site plan, are looks like we've got 4 separate entrances, or actually 5 entrances on Main Street. Are each of those serving a single unit, or are those providing access to common areas where essentially there's going to be several units going through these entrances?
I believe they serve single units, but I'll let Caleb address that.
Yeah, the question is coming off of Main Street, are those sidewalks serving single units?
Correct.
Yes, that is right. The 4 entrances on Main Street serves first floor, what'll probably be 2-bedroom units. Around on the corner, there'll be a primary entry that we're going to spend a lot of time on the landscape and the overall architecture there. And that'll be the primary entry if you're walking from the Main Street up to the 2nd and 3rd floors.
If I recall right, I think this is an area of Main Street where there's no street parking.
That is correct.
So do we recognize that there's some growth pain here as the planning goal is to make this into a central square, and right now there's not much really there's traffic problems, right? If you're inviting people to park or to pull over and put on their blinkers on the side of the street to get out and run to make a delivery, got some concerns about what that means for just Main Street traffic. Is that just
Yeah, I mean,
on the radar at all?
It's a comment that I think the town of Freeport will have to deal with, and certainly we as the civil engineering team and architectural team can deal with it. Certainly our priority as we read your plans and we look at your overall master planning is you're interested in a walkable neighborhood and you're interested in a dense downtown. And so this is what you typically get in dense downtowns. So yes, those larger traffic and parking issues the town of Freeport, I'm sure, will be dealing with, and we'll comply in the best way we can.
And there is parking opposite. There's some spots along the road, and there's a crosswalk, right, directly across from this lot.
There is a crosswalk, yeah. If not, there's 2 within pretty close distance, so.
Not a ton of parking.
It's not a ton of units either.
Right. Other questions, comments? Site plan? I guess as we move further along, more information on the planting plan will be helpful. exterior lighting on the building, street lighting, things along those lines will be helpful. Does Jason have, oh, sorry, did
I
you?
got a question.
Yeah.
One of the, from the visioning process that you're aware of, one of the messages that came out loud and clear was trees and big trees, you know, creating a kind of maybe a little bit of what it used to look like. Right now, I'm not seeing that it's possible to do that. You know, it looks like you've got some trees in here, you know, which are nice, but it doesn't look like those are going to be able to get very large because of the proximity to the building.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that is like when any town is dealing with the master planning and their own streetscapes, that has everything to do with the cross section of your street. You know, in an ideal world, you're doing 2-lane traffic, you're doing parallel parking, you're doing a tree strip, then you're doing a sidewalk, and then you're doing a building. We don't have that here, and then it becomes a choice. What's more important, holding the main street wall, which is what you're asking us to do through your ordinance and what we are doing, you know, or the large street trees. And at the moment, we understand the ordinance to read, you want to hold that street wall. And so, you know, it could certainly be an option to redo that section of street in your overall long-term planning to provide a tree strip along there, but I'm not aware that that's in the works. But those large trees need space. So
Right.
You got to separate them from the building.
Yep, that's.
So if we're doing, you know, if we're doing tight street wall buildings, then we're kind of constrained there.
Any other
Often
questions?
what they do in many of the main streets that we have worked on, you know, and you're familiar with this, they do this a lot in Portland, they do this in other ones, they will carve out in the sidewalk areas for street trees, dig them down, put a cast iron grate over them, so then it becomes, it's on city property. So that's the most common way to do it. And they used to do that in Maine with elm trees. So you'll see all these beautiful Main Street photos with huge elm trees planted in the sidewalk or right on the side of the road in the tree strip. But then we lost all our elms to Essex, I believe.
Dutch elm.
So, yeah, Dutch elm. So that's where they were. If you look at the old photographs, they weren't right up close to the buildings because they couldn't have gotten big enough. So you could consider that. You could consider, what do you call those things when you put the street tree right in the sidewalk?
Yeah, no, great.
Great, yeah. Tree grates.
Wells.
Tree grates in wells could be an option the city could look at.
Any other questions or comments?
Still on site plan?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, still in site plan. Jason, does he have any questions or comments?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to check. A couple topics I wanted to ask about. First was with the dumpster location. Wanted to ask if the adequacy of vehicular movement of the trash hauler across the town of Freeport town hall sites using the road network there has been reviewed for adequacy of the vehicular trajectory and certainly the condition of the road.
So the question is the trash truck going to be able to navigate through there?
Yes.
It was cutting, yes. Yes, I don't see an issue with that. Trash trucks are not, you're not talking about a 53-foot tractor trailer. You're talking about more of a 30-foot trash truck that's able to come in, pull forward, and then be able to unload, not really have to back up, and then be able to essentially pull straight out.
And then as it navigates the town site down the hill, making the turns, I guess that's where I'm more concerned than on the development property.
Yeah, no, I don't see an issue with that.
Okay. Second question had to do with the drainage, and it looks like, starting in the courtyard, that it kind of drains down the middle of the paved area and eventually starts to follow perpendicular to the contours, all headed, of course, to the low elevation of the site. And then along the south sort of eastern edge, you have a curved line where the drainage seems to flow along there, and it all ends up in the catch basin, the little long square driveway. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll have multiple catch basins that intercept the drainage and then be able to put it in our underground storage containment.
Okay, because it looked like on the plan that it was all headed to that one basin, and it didn't appear to connect to the underground storage. So it sounds like you're just working that out.
That's correct.
That's good. And then my third comment or topic was with the corner at Main Street and West, with the ramp to the main entrance kind of tucked around the corner. I feel like looking at the renderings, particularly from the stoplight point of view as you're first coming into town and proceeding down Main Street, that the ramp and the associated retaining wall don't really present themselves very well in terms of forming the corner. And I think it needs more work.
So this being a conceptual meeting, we're still in, as I think Caleb said this and before, we understand that's prominent. We understand there's an existing stone wall there, so we're still working through that and the landscape requirements. I mean, those are kind of the final touches to be able to work with you folks. We were really wanting to take a look at the massing of the building and take a look at the overall concept, and then kind of work on those finer details that we know that we can essentially address and basically make it acceptable to planning.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big finer detail. So
So we absolutely understand that needs more work, and it'll get more work.
okay, that's all we can say for now. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I just got one more question.
Yep, sure.
Where are the utility lines? Are they on that side of the street?
They're
This side of
coming
the street?
from West Street. So essentially, they're coming from, you have water, sewer, and we have electrical from this utility pole.
So are the poles going up West Street? And on Main Street, there are poles, and I don't remember if they're on one side or the other. I don't remember which side.
I'm not sure about Main Street, but I know we're connecting to this one that are right here. So the poles are on.
I'm not so concerned about your connecting. I'm thinking, again, visually, site-wise.
Yeah, I do not believe they're on our side,
Okay.
but I'll have to
Okay.
verify that. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about that.
I believe they are on this side of the road, but
Yeah.
So they'll run in front of the building.
they will.
Did you say they were?
I believe so.
Just a reminder for everybody, if you're going to speak, please go up to the microphone. No other questions, comments? Site plan? Okay. Design review. Are there any questions or comments about design review? Board?
Reaction, is this an appropriate time for, I think, to give you folks some
We're
reaction?
in concept.
And so this design review is all about fitting a building harmoniously with the scale and the style of the buildings around it. Site plan has some of that language. Design review is all about that. And I'm mindful that Main Street, we need to do some things different on Main Street. I'm mindful that housing is a priority. I'm also mindful that this site is not public property, although it feels so much like public property. Don't lean back, right? But I spent a long time looking at these elevations, and I cannot get comfortable with the notion that the scale and the style of this building fits in with all the things we need to find affirmatively to approve this project under site plan. So I'm sorry, particularly under design review. This is I don't view this as a site for a transitional building. Personally, I feel like you get past Beans, you get past the Public Works building, the public building, and this is the beginning of the old-fashioned feel of Main Street. And the building we're in is a delicate, historic building, more down the road, right across the street. And I just don't feel like the size of this fits in with that at all. It's all, as you well know, design review is all about fitting in with the scale and the style of what's around you. So I wanted to get comfortable with it, and I can't. You come down, when we're coming up to this stop light, which is at this intersection out here, which is your corner. This is elevated from that. You're seeing it from many hundred feet away. The fire station is set back, so this is gonna be all you see as you approach Main Street. So that's something I'm struggling with.
Yeah, a few questions about that. I appreciate the commentary, and it's any major change to a beloved Main Street is nerve-wracking, right? It's nerve-wracking for us because we all bring our kids here all the time. And then if you're looking at that building, it's like, are we proud of it or are we not proud of it? So completely understand that there's some hesitation. The idea here is we don't want to spend endless amount of Paul's money chasing subjective issues. We want to help him get to a solution that's comfortable to the town and subjectively and objectively meets the town's design review 10 requirements. Compatibility is what the town says it is looking for with a type C building. Often when I'm standing here, there's people that at the end of the day, they want us to recreate a 19th century building, right? And so we could spend a lot of time just recreating a 19th century apartment block, creating details that would have been done 200 years ago. And that might be a fast way to do it, to get comfort level, to move the project forward. What we struggle with is that's not the way your ordinance reads. And it's not, so we're assuming then that the people of Freeport are looking for a contemporary building, Class C building, that does not mimic 19th century detailing, because that has the tendency to cheapen a Main Street and kind of give you that Christmas tree shop effect, which would be unfortunate for Freeport. It would steal from the authenticity of the real building. So we're here for comments. It's your city. It's Paul's project. We want to thread the needle, but you'll have to help us understand when you say it's not compatible. Are we talking it doesn't have enough rhythm? Are we talking it's too tall? Are we saying you want 12 units, not 26 or 25? Would be helpful, just so we can come back and give you something that is a true response, because I do hear you're just not comfortable with it. It'd be nice to hear some things that we could work on.
Well, I'm not, okay, and we don't want to get too far into the weeds here.
Yeah.
Early on, I'm not comfortable with the scale of it, for starters. Just because it's a big lot doesn't mean it has to be a giant building. It dwarfs anything up on this end of Main Street once you get up on this rise. And I think if you go through and I'm sure you have gone carefully through the design review ordinance, there are a bunch of findings we need to make that I don't think this building conforms to.
Right.
So it's not just subjective.
Yeah, no, agreed. I mentioned subjective and objective criteria, so that would be fine, and we can get down to it. But we have, of course, read the 10 criteria and tried our best to respond to it with a 24-unit building. And you do, of course, and this is not you do, of course, get like you can't purchase the lot and develop the site if you don't have enough units to sell, because the price of the lot doesn't go down. So you start getting into points where some people might prefer it be 12 units, therefore a smaller building, but does that just kill the project? And that's more for Paul to answer. Our job is to answer towards, are we meeting what your ordinance is asking us to meet relative to the 10 criteria? So we'd be happy to talk about any of those.
Sure, I'm going to jump in. You keep bringing up the 10 criteria. That's section 8.
Yep.
C within the design review ordinance. and it lists those 10. But that first paragraph is also extremely important in understanding how to apply those 10. So
Okay.
I will read that paragraph just so we have it. Design guidelines for all buildings within the districts, newly constructed or reconstructed buildings, as well as existing buildings and their appurtenances which have been altered, repaired, or moved, shall be visually compatible with the buildings, squares, and places to which they are visually related, and specifically with nearby and/or adjacent A or B buildings in terms of the following factors. So it's telling you right off the bat, the first place to look are the adjacent or nearby A and B buildings. That's where the design inspiration should come from. So I have to agree with Ford. I think this is extremely contemporary looking. And when I see it and where it's located, I have a hard time understanding which A and B buildings nearby or adjacent to this lot were you looking at to come up with something like this. I don't hate this. I think this is an interesting design. I'm just not sure it's appropriate for that corner at that location in Freeport. Okay?
Yep.
So that's, when we talk
Looking
about
for-
these 10,
Yep.
the first place to look is how do we understand what the ordinance is saying with regard to those 10?
Right. Yeah, and that's we can certainly take that into account, and Paul will ask us to. He's here to hear the comments so he can guide it quickly through. When I read it and when our team read it, we did read on a national level when you're dealing in historic districts, it's highly discouraged to mimic antique buildings. So it is a careful line, right? Like we can mimic an antique building and we can get down that Christmas tree shop effect, or we can look to say the building next door has vertical windows. So let's not do ribbon windows across the whole facade that are, horizontal in nature. So let's go vertical. The adjacent building's overall facade, have vertical pieces like the one up in the upper left. So let's make sure we orient it in a portrait way instead of a landscape way, because we could just go overall landscape. So it's the big moves of vertical versus horizontal. A typical Main Street building is 35 to 40 feet wide, not 200 feet wide. So let's break it up into those and let's start to develop a rhythm there. And no Main Street buildings have a big long cornice, that just runs for 200 feet. So let's make sure that breaks up. But at the end of the day, financial viability of a project does depend on scale. There's no way around it. So we do have to deal with that scale problem. And then it's our job as architects, like, okay, if we're building a big building, how do we make it? And the word I read is compatible, right? So unfortunately, I am not a lawyer, but compatible is a fairly subjective term, right? And when you're referring to those first pieces. And so for me, compatibility recognizes the antique by, giving it something that the antique can be recognized as antique and the contemporary can be recognized as contemporary. And if the two mix, to me, they're not compatible. What you've done is created a confused discourse. But compatible, what's compatible? That's what I read. And I think that when you hired this group to write this ordinance, that's their intention, and they often take that from the National Park Service that deals with most historic districts.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I've got a couple comments.
Yeah, sure.
Recognizing that compatible is kind of a discretionary term. Kind of chiming on some of the comments that have already been made, maybe a couple of ideas that might open up that door is, for one, kind of triangulated roof structures that are not consistent all the way through, but have kind of offer up some space gaps between what might appear as separate structures with separate triangle, as opposed to what we currently have is like a flat line roof, all the same. Another thing that stands out is that when you look at all the other buildings on Main Street, one thing that's consistent across the board is kind of the window shape and that contrast nature of the window framing. Comparing that to the very modern window shapes and kind of dark framing. I think that's a relatively simple place where you're not faking the style as much as adding an aspect of blend. I mean, there's some modern features that bring in classic features such as roof shape, such as window shape. And I think above all, one thing that stands out here is, and as you noted, and I think was raised earlier, this is the beginning of downtown Freeport. The corner section that you have at Main Street and West,
Could you go to that slide?
this corner looks like a back rear corner,
Like a what?
like a building's back rear corner. I mean, this is a, this needs accent, this needs to be a centerpiece of this building, because in fact, if the long-term plan is that this corner becomes a town square, town squares are built on, these kind of prominent corners. That's the centerpiece. And I think that's not what we're seeing here in this design.
Yeah, I take that's really great feedback. Certainly the comments about window trim around windows, like that's, we can do traditional window trim around windows. That's easy to do. So yeah, that's all good commentary. I will, mention that when you're talking about a triangular roof form, that's a gable, and that has to do with the building that's underneath it. And so to put those on a building of this shape and size, pretty problematic geometrically, and it quickly, then you're gonna go over it's gonna just become a much bigger, taller, more imposing building, and I'd have to, anyway, so there's discussions there. But it's good feedback because we need to know where we're at with your board. Your board eventually approves this or denies it, so we have to deal with the comments. One thing for your consideration, it's not hard to get us as architects. It would be hard to get it paid for, but to do something big and splashy and just have a great old time, architecturally speaking, make a big statement. What I learned, and it might not be what you guys have learned as it comes to urban planning, but if it's a background building, that corner has 3 apartments in it. So those are not foreground civic spaces. Those are people's apartments. And so when you hold a corner with a big foreground building next to a town square, traditionally that's a church, that's a city hall, that's a school building, that's like used to be like Mason buildings and that kind of thing. It's not, traditionally speaking, apartment buildings in traditional towns are background, and so they don't make a huge statement. They let the fire station, the park, make the big statement, because this is just somebody's house. But you could push back and say you want us to do a big statement here.
I think you might be misunderstanding what I mean by a statement.
Okay.
What we're talking about, for example, if you look at the building that's halfway down Main Street, the building that, I think it was the old library that used to be the Clark's store. It's got that kind of that rounded front.
What you're talking about.
That's not this big ornate thing, but it's something that draws attention to a point.
Yep.
And
that's a beautiful
this
building.
corner,
Yep.
I think, warrants attention being drawn to a point. That being that front corner.
That makes sense, and that's a beautiful background building. I agree.
To continue, just visually from this, what I'm seeing is a lot of concrete. I'm seeing the walkways, the ramp going up. I'm seeing a lot of metal industrial type railing. That's what it strikes me as. I'm seeing the 4 walkways off of Main Street in. Again, I'm not seeing something that I feel is consistent with the rest of downtown, going back to the old library, for example. And I'm going to go back to the offset from the face. you mentioned that that's consistent with what's on Main Street, but that doesn't start getting picked up until, further back down here. And what you're doing is bringing it right up and sticking it in everybody's face. And again, I think there's a way to tone it differently.
Maybe set the building back farther.
Well, I think it's a combination of scale, the way the facade looks, and the stairways, and I don't think it's. I know you said you're continuing the face forward, bringing it up here, but I don't think that face really starts until further down on Main Street. It doesn't need to be brought up here.
Right. Yeah, this is a direct response to your master plan, where the master planners that you hired, they filled in the corner, So you could tell us that that's not your preference, and we could talk to Paul about that.
And the other thing too is coming up from West Street, going back to scale, you're going to be looking at 4 stories
On West Street.
coming up West
Yeah.
Street, which is quite a change.
I just want to
Yes.
clarify, there's a 3-story limit up to 45 feet. There is a possibility that depending on interpretation of stories and the basement being finished and unfinished, that back corner could have to come down some. Just want to get that in the record because they can't go over 3 stories, but they need to meet the definition. So it's conceptual, they're still working through that, but just be aware that corner coming up from West Street.
Well, if there's
could come down.
an apartment unit or a living unit downstairs down there, it is 4 stories, isn't it?
Well, if they had a basement unfinished, that's what we're waiting to get a little bit of clarification on. So that could fluctuate. I just want to get that out there.
Well, then I'd go back to harmonious.
Yeah, no, the drive up West Street and the way this building addresses the grade change on West Street is it's definitely something that we have been working on, and it needs more work. Yep.
Quiet.
Any, comments, questions, Linda? You're on deck.
I was going back to something on the West Street side, and the existing ledge, you're going to have to remove all of that ledge on the West Street side, and then the part that's abutting this building area. I guess you do that with blasting?
I mean, most likely that would be blasted, yep. And within whatever ordinance you guys have, there's always blasting ordinances. It'd certainly probably be a little bit less disruptive than lots of chipping, but yeah, it'd probably be blasting.
Okay, so that's just something pointed out from the plan. The blasting up on the part on the eastern side, next to here, and that's where the wetland, or I'm calling it a wetland, okay?
All right, it's a catchment.
If that's going to disturb any of that flow, I think that would have to be looked at also.
Right. Just the overall stormwater management plan. Yep. Yeah, it's at the all of that is still at the outset, so we could get comments like we're getting tonight, but yeah, pay attention to that.
Did you have any design
No.
comments, questions? Okay, all right. Does Jason have any questions or comments?
I do. It's a good conversation. Trying to figure out where to start off, but I feel maybe more sympathetic to the design than others on the board have expressed so far. Reason for that is if it's not a completely new paradigm, at least it's a different paradigm than what we're used to for density when it comes to residential accommodations in town. And so when you get into higher density arrangements like that, there has to be a certain, I guess, efficiency to how the building is put together and how you handle the resulting square footage on the level and pulling together in terms of scale and proportion and modulation. And I think it's doing all of those things. Can it be improved? Yes. It's up to Caleb to work on that with Eric. But and I do think that the corner needs to be well crafted. It doesn't need to be emphatic, but it needs to, control the. Well, a long time ago, I think this site was talked about as like the gateway to Freeport. So it still kind of needs to do that because it's the first thing after you've come through the 35-mile-an-hour traffic zones and come to the light, and then suddenly things start to slow down. So you have to start to appreciate it from that different speed and that different speed as you're moving through town, and certainly walking. I think the street side is articulated here with landscaping and the solid to void. It has a sort of nice livability to it. It's different than anything we've ever seen in Freeport, at least at this scale. I suppose one semi-precedent is, gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but off of South Street, it might be Oak Terrace, the building that's tucked in the back that you can see from the train, has a similar arrangement. What it doesn't have is the level of articulation that this design has, and the articulation maybe could be like working against it in some ways, but it's better than a monolithic facade. And having those like recesses that are more in shadow and the parts that come out or to the front more in the sun, and just having that playfulness will start to break down the feeling of a large or long facade, again, in this more dense paradigm, which is something that we're just needing to wrestle with what the right mix is with that. It was well received in terms of the adding vitality to downtown Freeport and the need for being able to find places to live in town within the walkability of town. So all those are good things. I think that trying to build up the roof line to give it an aesthetic that has to do with a different era would be more problematic than anything else. So I think the way it caps itself now is a good start. Maybe one way to try to address the question is to play with the third story in term, maybe with some setbacks here and there that help to scale the overall height and reduce its impact in that sense. I'm sorry for rambling on for so long, but that's kind of what I'm pulling from the conversation. And I think one thing that will be important in terms of the execution of the design, looking at it in a higher level of detail, is the way that the materials turn corners. I mean, like not the big corners, but corner at the west, but like corners of each one of the building volumes, and having that be as authentic as possible. I think these kind of get into trouble when there are like metal trims and transitions that just don't have enough presence to them. So that's, I think this really is traditional-ish sort of trimming scheme that allows the corners to look right without going forward. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions from the board? Linda?
Yes, I have one question or comment. I'm a bit out of my element here with this comment, but I'm thinking about the statement you keep saying about this is, and everyone's saying about this is the vision of a town square. When I was involved with the visioning committee and all that, to me, the town square was having something here that was open greenery and park, but I know that's not something we're asking for or we can ask for. So you have a building. My thought is, can you possibly, instead of having the squared corner at Main and West, can you cut it in so that there is a little, and maybe you end up losing one or two apartments, that's your decision, but could you cut it in so that there was an inset area that maybe could have a more of a green area with some benches or something like that, that could look a little more town square-y? I don't know architecturally if that's possible or not.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating comment for us to consider. You know, I think building squares and landscape that you can't sell instead of condos that you can to pay for your development and make sure it happens is the question there. That's the question. Certainly, we would love to do the most beautiful, you know, I think it's Jason's comments about bringing materials together. I mean, I would love to build this of stone and brick. It's just not going to happen, right? I'd love to build it of like real wood and like craft it all right here with all of our shipbuilders like we do some of the fine, you know, homes that we build. But the economics of that aren't going to happen. So we have to face that. I think that it's an interesting point you make. Can we invert that corner? There's a couple things immediately, you know, back from when I was studying, you know, you hold a corner. That's what you do. To really hold the street wall, you build out the corner, you establish the street walls, you get good street trees in front of it, all of that. That said, you know, I hear a lot of commentary about that entry. And as I look at it, well taken. Like we can reconsider that primary corner where we're entering the building because it takes a lot of visual thrust as you're driving north on Main Street, you know? And so maybe if we really consider the scale of that, you know, visual importance, maybe we do have a different solution there than just filling it out with building. So I don't, you know, I think it's a great comment. A concern we have is, you know, when we got away from building main streets and we started building strips, then all the buildings moved to the back and all the cars moved to the front. So what we're doing with, and nobody likes that anymore, right? That's the strip malls that all the towns are trying to get rid of, and some of it exists farther south from this point, and we're trying to go back to a walkable, not car-based Main Street. And so a concern that we have had and that we got from the master plan is put the parking behind an L-shaped building so that we don't have what we have to the south of here, which is seas of parking lot instead of beautiful buildings. So, but could you carve out that corner, make something that's a little bit, you know, that is more visually appealing? I'll say we can make something that's more visually appealing, but we don't want to open it up to the cars as far as I understand it, just because that's not what we're looking to achieve with the master plan that we are looking at. But, you know, it's a good comment, and it leads us down to, you know, just on that corner, a lot of thought, because we're all going to live with that corner for a long time. What are the materials on that corner? You know, how Jason said something that really resonated with me. I was not able to take notes, but it was something to the effect of, rather than like a really flamboyant expression on the corner, do a nuanced, you know, careful architectural expression on the corner. And I think that's exactly right. You know, back to what I believe it's James was saying, you know, when I misunderstood him saying, like, go crazy on the corner, it's like, just be really careful on that corner. And I think, Linda, you're saying the same thing. So all of those points are well taken, and we can work hard on the corner and the materiality of the corner and how it addresses a northbound car and pedestrian.
Just one last thing, and that is, I think, you know, I'm certainly very supportive of bringing units into downtown like this. So don't leave without knowing that. So.
Yeah. If we don't get enough units, then it just doesn't work. So it has to have as many units as possible. As far as we understand the numbers, you know, coming from the developer, it falls off pretty fast if we don't get a lot of units there. The viability of the project falls off fast.
I'm repeating myself, but I don't want my feeling on this to get lost. The first review stand, Guy read you the introductory language, and then the first of the 10 is about scale. And if you read it, we have to view your project within the definition of scale.
Sure.
As it's in the design review ordinance.
Yeah. Yeah, so some things as you say that to me occur to me that we might, hopefully there's enough objective language in that will give us some tools to fix it without making the project unfinancially viable. And there's a few things that I can think of that, are we busting it into 2 buildings, for instance? Are we, which is more expensive, but could that possibly work? I don't really know. It is a tight site. That's the one thing that we learned. At first we walked it and I'm like, oh man, this is killer. And then we started designing on it and we're like, wow, like it's really, in order to get enough units to make the pro forma work so that it can go forward, and get enough parking on there, you got to fill up the site. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So that is a challenge, and if it's not, the price of the site is the price of the site. So if it's not this project, what project will afford it? So we have to balance that. But as you're talking about scale, I think it would be good. When you're talking about scale, I don't think you're saying units. You're saying building. Right.
I'll read you the language.
Please do. That'd be great.
This is the first of the 10 standards. The scale of a building depends on its overall size, the mass in its relationship to open space around it, and the sizes of doors, windows, porches, and balconies. The scale gives a building presence. That is, it makes it seem big or small, awkward or graceful, overpowering or unimportant. The scale of a building should be visually compatible with its site and with its neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah, I picture that. This is not me being argumentative, but I picture there's these great books put out by an excavator, actually, that photograph all these towns as they're being built, through the 1800s and the 1900s. And at times, there are huge masonry blocks standing alone on a main street. And so, like, where do you start? If this is the start of it, do you want it to keep going, or do we break it up? And it's your choice, but we'll struggle with that. How can we get you guys to say yes to scale while keeping it at a large enough scale to make the project work? So we'll figure that out.
Thanks. I mean, ultimately, it's not the board's responsibility to help design the project for
Definitely
you.
not.
We really rely on the applicant to do that. You can, take the comments that you've received today. Oftentimes, we find with larger projects that come before us, just some tweaks, some edits really make a huge difference. It could be in materials. It could be just, we talked about that articulated exterior, maybe shifting it differently. Right? It just changes the way it presents on the street while still keeping the rhythm of the buildings that you see as you go down Main Street. So just things to consider, things like that. I think those kinds of subtle changes may make a big difference. So just
Appreciate that, yeah.
things to think about.
Keep that in mind.
Sure. At this time, I would like to open it up to the public. If any members of the public are here and wish to comment on this application, please keep those comments to the application. Remember, we are reviewing subdivision, site plan, and design review, so please keep those comments on point. We'll start with folks in the room here. If you would like to speak, please go up to the microphone. Thank you.
Do you want me to put this on, or?
You should be able to speak into that one.
Okay.
And if not, that...
He's going to come and tell me?
Yes, Tom. Sorry, Tom.
So my name is Shannon Garrity, and I live at 25 West Street. And if you show the view of down West Street, you see my front yard. So I would like to encourage your review to also realize that this is part of West Street and not just Main Street. And this is a huge change, and it's huge from my house. Hadn't thought of the blasting, Ms. Berger. Thank you very much. That's a big deal for my house, and I'm curious what that means. I would like to mostly focus on the traffic, and thank you again for bringing that up as well. The answers I felt like focused on a concern if you were heading north up West Street. That's not a concern. The concern is that tourists do not know where to turn when they come into town. I drive that multiple times a day. if you have people turning right off of Main Street onto West Street and stopping to try to turn into this spot, and buses in the spot across from the fire station, there's going to be accidents. And it's, no, I am sorry if that came to me that I had any input with the town engineer about that entrance. I don't remember seeing that, but I cannot believe that was approved, because the traffic in that area, that's dangerous. I am happy that you took into consideration that it is one way and that we would at least only have traffic going in. But all of the answers were about people going northbound and didn't take into consideration when that train is down and that train is crossing. That is a personal issue for me, because I worked for years with the town to get our quiet zone. And the more traffic that we have, and if we start to have accidents because people don't pay attention to that crossing, that dramatically affects my life and everybody along Main Street. And it would probably affect the value of your apartments, because we would have noise 6 times a day, including at 1 and 4 in the morning when the whistles get blown. So I appreciate your comments that it's big. It's very big. I encourage you to think about the size of the houses that are down on West Street, because a lot of them are the old Mallet buildings and my little ranch. And also, I really have a lot of concerns about the traffic and turning in there and the accidents that are going to happen. Perhaps there's mitigation around directions for tourists of where they need to turn. I don't know, but it is not safe right now to have that there. I do have one question about the plan. Can you put that up there? Or I'm unsure, where is this property line? Is it the trees? Or like, do town employees park right here right now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak?
So, my name is Peter Enzweedy. I don't live in District 1, so it's not as painful to me as it is to someone living on West Street. But I wanted to give you a couple things. One is, you know, it's a struggle, and you all know it's a struggle between getting apartments and meeting the return on investment components of any project. But I believe that one of the things that, as a member of town, I totally agree with your idea about scale. You know, those units in that corner, I mean, I thought that having the market in that corner was a lot. So now you're putting a 200-foot building in that lot, and I think that's way too big for that lot. The second component, though, is that if you could cut, when I saw your picture, I think of Portland. When I drive down to Portland, I see the university dorm rooms, exactly the same style that you're trying to do. Now, you've differentiated it a little bit by pushing out building and inside, but it's like, oh my God, you know, that's really a frightening look. And the third piece was balconies on Main Street. I think they would add value to the apartments or the condos. However, if you take a drive down Route 1 in Yarmouth, you'll see there's a couple apartment houses on the left. And there's all kinds of things that go on those apartments and those balconies. So I'm not sure that over time, you would not get some additional things that you'd have to manage. Thank you.
Any other members of the public?
West Street, a couple doors down from Shannon. I realize I'm coming in late. I've been watching on Zoom. I just walked over after I realized you had opened it up to public comment. And I am unprepared, so please forgive me for a moment, but my husband and I moved back to Freeport after raising our children on Kendall Lane roughly 17 years we spent in Freeport. We love this town with our whole heart. My husband works in Biddeford, I work in Yarmouth. When my kids graduated college, we decided that we would be moving to Old Orchard Beach to get closer to his job. We built a beautiful home, and after 3 years, we decided that our home was in Freeport. So we bought 21 West Street and decided to make it our home 4 years ago. And we love being on this street because it is tucked in there. It feels residential. It feels quiet and happy and quaint. And within 10 seconds, we can be on the highway and all of those things. But the quaintness, we realize, is going to be completely gone if something of this size, especially if the other building goes in, the 67 unit on Depot Street goes in. So I'm just trying to express to everyone our need to keep it as quaint as possible and keep the traffic, because just like Shannon, my worry desperately is the traffic, just the amount of cars that go along with that many units. Granted, I also don't agree with the facade or the way that it presents sort of commercially and industrially. That's subjective, I agree, but the traffic and just the overall scale. I also agreed that it looked like 4 stories from the back if you're coming up West Street to Main Street. So I'm uncomfortable with just how it looks from all 3 corners. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you so much.
I live in District 2. I'm the director of Freeport Historical Society. First of all, I appreciate Chairman Blanchard's reference to the opening of the ordinance and really sort of focusing once again on the Class A and B buildings. And certainly Mr. Reike's comments about, and several of you, that the fact that this is the gateway. And I've heard, talking about holding the street wall, which I understand, but this really is, that entire intersection is the beginning of the Freeport Village. And I think as the town has spent so much time working on what the vision for the downtown should be, this really is a premier spot that ought to be a transition, not necessarily architecturally, but a transition into what the downtown is. So also just to mention, as you all know, that it's this building that begins the downtown Freeport Historic District. So this building is not just the entrance to the downtown, it's also right on the border with the historic district. So the one thing that I would just emphasize about, I think, what the intent of the design review ordinance is, and its constant reference back to those original historic buildings within the downtown specifically or adjacent to the site, is that it isn't about making this look like someplace else. It isn't about it referencing other historic things or other town plans, but it is really supposed to look like it was inspired by Freeport, that it is somehow authentically Freeport, even if it is a brand new, somewhat modern, Class C building. So I understand and I appreciate the architectural concerns around not trying to mimic something that is historic or try to make it look historic. But in terms of the texture, the scale, the materials, and what the image is that it's presenting really ought to be somehow inspired by what the surroundings are. And you ought to be able to see that in the visual cues. Just one other comment I would say, it was interesting to hear the reference, and I do appreciate the fact that you included all of those historic downtown buildings in the photos in the presentation. But the comment that there isn't a building that has a 200-foot-long cornice on Main Street, well, there actually is, and it is a corner lot. It is the Davis block. It is what holds the corner of the existing town square. And
The reason I mention that is not that I think this building should mimic the Davis block, but it is an example of how in Freeport you hold a corner. And the corner is, in fact, the emphasis. That is where the entrance is. And traditionally, historically, that was an apartment building, or it was a hotel, but it's been both, but it's been housing. It's been somewhat residential. So I think looking at that, it also happens to have a gable facade on the corner, even though it is flat roof building. So there are details there that, again, maybe aren't to be mimicked, but could be inspirational for how you hold this corner as the gateway to Freeport.
Thanks. Any other comments from members of the public? Okay.
I'm Mary Davis. I'm president of the Freeport Economic Development Corp. And I just want to say thank you to Paul and his team. We're at an interesting precipice in Freeport where everyone told us in the downtown visioning, we want more housing downtown. And so as a town and a board, we're trying to find the balance of the two. And I really appreciate all of the comments here. I appreciate all your team's work. And somehow us coming together to do this is what's going to make Freeport just a really viable town. So I know this is hard work. It is hard work. It's messy work, but it's the right work for us to be doing because we want more people living back downtown like they were how many years ago. So thank you.
Any other comments from folks in the room? Okay. Is there anybody online that wishes to comment on this application?
We'll give a minute for anyone online to raise their hand if they want to comment. We still have one attendee. I do not see a hand going up.
No hands?
No hands.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? In our packet of materials, we did have a proposed motion with regard to the conceptual review for subdivision, and we can move on that tonight. We can also discuss a potential site walk if the board feels it's necessary.
I think we need to do a site walk.
Okay.
There might be value doing a site walk.
I'm not sure when, though.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. I don't know if a site walk would be more valuable after we, you know, get more information. I'm not sure how that works.
Right. You're talking with regard to approving the conceptual plan under subdivision?
No, I was
No.
thinking more in terms of the site plan and
Okay.
design review. I'm not sure the site walk is gonna help. Well, the site walk, I think, can help with design review too. Because I think we'll get an idea of, by walking out there,
Right.
of the scale and all of that. So I think a site walk would be helpful. Again, I'm not sure when it would be, you know, when the right time to do that would be.
I'd probably say sooner rather than later in the process, right?
Yes,
Kind
but
of similar to how we're treating with, the 67-unit building.
But I don't know if there will be another resubmittal before we, that might make sense to do a site walk after there's some updated information. I
Okay.
don't know.
I see, okay. Yep. Okay, any other thoughts on that?
I think I would join that a site walk would be helpful, although I don't think that I would say that a site walk would have to be a prerequisite to moving forward on the preliminary stage.
Right.
I, of course, want to add my 2 cents to this.
Sure, Linda.
I feel that site walks are kind of an imperative for this type of plan and this building, and I believe what we might see on a site walk really can direct us in what we think for the concept and the site location, because there may be things that could be pointed out as we're on site that would maybe make your side and our side, although we're not on opposite sides, obviously, but look at this design and the location in a little different way that might make it easier to say, well, this could be moved here you know, if you had markers where you are right now, maybe there is a 10 or 20-foot setback in one area, and before I would like to approve a concept, I would like to see that we're going through every alternative from a conceptual plan before we go forward.
Does Jason have any thoughts?
Sorry, was muted. I would echo what Linda just said.
Okay.
I agree.
Board
I
agrees?
agree with Linda's comment.
Okay. Yep. So what I'm hearing then is a site walk is preferred by the board prior to approving the conceptual plan under subdivision, or is that not?
Or site plan review, at least.
Well, what you have tonight, again, we have the 3 reviews. So with site plan, you don't take conceptual preliminary action. You work with the applicant through the process till the end. Same with design review. For a subdivision, because of the number of units, it's a major subdivision. So they present a conceptual plan. The ordinance says the purpose of the conceptual phase is for the board to determine if the appropriate areas of the lot are shown for development and for open space. In this case, you don't have open space required. So if you took action on the concept, it's really just that conceptual subdivision piece. And as we talked at the last meeting, is that building generally, based upon the information presented, is the building generally in the same, or the right location? It might shift if they do indents or vice versa, but you know that it's gonna be probably where it's shown today. Not to say that can't change, they could, you know, backtrack and come back, but that's really the only thing the motion before you is doing tonight. The next steps for subdivision would be preliminary. That's when they start to do some of the engineering, and then they'd come back for final. They don't typically for subdivision get into the engineering until they know the building's in the right approximate place, because they're not gonna wanna start designing stormwater if, you know, there could still be significant fluctuation in the general overall layout.
Can I add a comment? Sure. That in mind, given that the amount of time, amount of focus on our discussion today about site, or rather on design review, it might be prudent to be able to circle back with a discussion on design review before we greenlight, you know, the much more cost-intensive developments as to the site plan engineering review, because I think, I perceive that that's not nearly as controversial or a matter of concern as much as this board is concerned with some of the site issues, design issues.
Right. So, just so I understand, are you?
What I'm saying is, I'm proposing a slightly different approach where I would move that we provide the preliminary status, and ask that we have a return conversation on design before we get into the next steps of the site plan and subdivision plan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that we have enough information tonight to be able to move on the motion that's before us. And I think after that point, having a site walk, you know, we can think about site plan a bit more on that site walk. We can think about design review a bit more on the site walk as well. And I think it would be prudent if the applicant then came back and you know, if they were potentially changing the exterior, to come back to us for a little bit more feedback before you advance the design too far. I just think that's a really good idea based on the feedback and what I've heard today. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something we can necessarily require, but.
No, I think, you know, it's up to them to make the decision that works. The way the weeks fall, they do have another week that they could work on getting revised materials in if they wanted to alter their design and bring something back and just come back with that next month or at another meeting. They could do that. I think a site walk will be beneficial. They could flag the building similar to how we did today, but I would suggest that we as a board circle the site maybe, because there are grade changes, you don't realize it. Years ago, we looked at development on this site, and it actually is a little bit higher than Town Hall. And I think seeing the connections and then maybe looking at, all of the corners we talked about, I mean, it's pretty easy
Right.
circle to walk, but I think that could be beneficial
Yeah.
for the board. It's up to them if they want to work on if you took action on the concept, if they want to go ahead and start the engineering and work on preliminary, that's really up to them. If something changes in the building that changed their stormwater design, then
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
up to them.
Okay. So I think we'll schedule a site walk.
So and hoping of the board that we would do similar to what you did tonight, schedule a site walk right before the next meeting, or would you rather do the site walk on a separate?
I think that would be my
Wednesday.
preference if we could do it, especially since it's just right there.
We do it before a meeting.
Do it
I
right
agree.
before the meeting.
So plan on, I think the next meeting is August 20th, maybe?
17th.
17th, so do you want to do 5:30 again,
I think
or?
a half hour's plenty, of time. It worked well today.
I don't know. I thought we could have actually spent a little bit more time there today.
Really?
Yep.
You want to do 5:15?
Sure. Jeez, Todd.
Because I think.
Too hot.
I think, yeah, it's 5:15.
But if it's 90 degrees, then 5:30? Okay. 5:15 is,
I'm not a meteorologist, so
Yeah.
we're going to go with 5:15. If
Sounds
anything,
good.
we'll give you a few minutes to cool off
I think
before
that
the
works.
meeting.
Okay. 5:15. So then I will entertain a motion for the concept plan. Okay.
Well, I'd move to approve.
Unfortunately, you'll need to read the proposed motion, because we are in hybrid mode. Sorry, I should have reminded the board.
Let's look at the language, because I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
Is that the
This guy right here.
Yeah, that's what you have. And no open spaces required.
So, I would move that the project review board determines that based upon the information submitted by the applicant dated June 27th, 2020, that the review of the site inventory map, site analysis, and
You can
conceptual.
just read it.
What?
You can just read it.
I'm reading it.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for the be it ordered.
I didn't say be it ordered.
Oh, okay. You can start with be it ordered if you'd like. Sorry, Jim, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
So I'm moving that the project review board determine that based upon the information submitted by the applicant, submission dated June 27, 2022, the review of the site inventory map, site analysis, conceptual plan for LWS LLC for proposed residential subdivision, tax map 11, lot 132, is considered complete as the board finds that the appropriate areas have been determined for development and no open space is required, subject to supplemental design submissions.
Second.
Caroline, can we do that at the addition at the end? The supplemental design?
Yeah, I think it's part of the process, so I don't really see it as problematic.
Oh, good. Okay, great. And there was a second by Todd? Okay.
And just as a matter of discussion, I just add, I think the purpose of the supplement is just to kind of make clear, before we kind of invest deeply in this project, let's talk about make sure that we're all on the same page about the design, because right now I feel like we're not, but we could be.
Thanks. Okay, I will do a roll call vote.
Can we have discussion after the second?
Sure.
I think that's normal procedure, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Ford.
This is usually the easiest step in our approval process. It's usually viewed as everything's here, we'll figure out so much at subsequent meetings. I'm concerned that Embedded in this approval, though, is also something we usually take for granted, that the development is appropriate for the site, and that the open space allocated is appropriate for the site. And all my concerns, and that of others, is the scale. And so I think we need to reach this finding affirmatively to vote for this. The board shall review the submission to determine if the information provides a clear understanding of the site and identifies opportunities and constraints that help determine how it should be used, areas that are appropriate for conservation and areas that are appropriate for development. So I don't want to vote in the affirmative and then have us in the position we cross that bridge. I have not crossed that bridge.
I would agree with you from what you just said.
I think what we're moving approval at this stage is general site location, the lack of issues with open space, and the general number of units. Now, we've got the scaling issue for this project strikes me as one of how those units are incorporated into whether it appears large or small. But I think in terms of the fundamental questions of the number of units, we don't have an issue on, given we've got public sewer, public utilities here. I mean, those things that we've had issues with other projects, non-issue in this location. We don't have a problem with the number of units. We have a problem with the way we've got debate about the manner in which they're placed, like the manner in which the building incorporates them.
I think that's the essence of the motion, but we'll vote on it.
With regard to conservation.
So this is not, open space subdivisions are not required downtown, so there's not an open space requirement. They still go through, they calculate the net residential acreage, they have to show the wetlands, which they did. There's no steep slopes, there's no floodplain, there's no water bodies. So they showed all of that stuff on your site. They go through that 4-step design process, but they don't have to set any open space aside based upon the standards in that law. As we talked about earlier, they could cover 90% of it is what the zoning would allow. We're not, the issue of the scale of the building is 100% a design review issue. This is, you have to look at this as more of like, based upon what they gave you for the land analysis, do you think they're putting it in the right place? Or do you think, no, they're not, because, well, they have the net residential acreage, there's no land per dwelling, but, you know, if you feel like the way they show the wetlands or some other natural features of the site.
Yeah, I understand, and I understand that subdivision our subdivision ordinance does not lend itself perfectly to buildings like this.
Yeah, not in the village. We've
I
quickly
still have my
learned that.
concern.
Yeah, no, that's all accurate.
I'm going to withdraw my second. Okay. And I'm going to suggest that we table this and do a site walk.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have no problems with the areas shown for development on the plan. I mean, it's a small-ish lot. You're really not going to orient the building any differently, you know, and then as part of this design process, you know, they might open something up here or shift something, but again, in concept, I think it's fine. I would be comfortable with the motion, but I can't second the motion. Does Jason want to second the motion and we can vote? Or
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I do second the motion.
Okay, so we have a second. So we'll take a vote on the motion. It'll be a roll call vote. If the motion fails, can we move to table after? Or should we
Let's not
move
get
to
ahead of
table
ourselves.
instead?
Yeah, my only concern is you don't
Because we may
have an odd number tonight.
I know.
And I think the applicant got a lot of feedback on the building design. It sounds like they're gonna take another stab at it. I don't see a reason that it would hurt to table it and they could come back. You could do the site walk and take action on the concept, but it's up to you guys. I mean, you're the only ones that can move second and vote.
And Caroline, you're gonna have to remind me, if the vote ends up as a tie, it fails, is that correct?
I would have to look that up or not in design review here.
Yeah. Okay.
But definitely am sensing there's some different levels of discomfort, and knowing
There
that the
is.
motion was made, that some board members want to see more in the building. I think, in fairness,
Okay.
it's just fine probably to table it.
Table, okay. Is there a motion?
Yeah, somebody have to motion.
Yeah, move to table,
So moved.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second. Okay, let's vote on the table. Berger,
This is to table, right?
to table.
Yes.
Okay, Blanchard, yes. Monteleone,
No.
Breike,
Yes.
Yankee,
Yes.
Donahue,
No.
tabled. Thank you. And we'll schedule the site walk for
So
the
that was
next
a,
meeting.
that was a 4-2 vote.
It was a 4-2 vote, that's right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, site walks are open to the public. Anyone that got a mailed notice today will get a mailed notice for the site walk as well.
Okay. I mean, potentially how this could work is that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We site walk and they're still on the agenda, and then we can approve the concept following the site walk. Is that?
Yeah, I think if they were going to be on the next agenda, or for the site walk, I'll talk to them. If they want to come back with even the materials you have today, they can do that. And if they want to submit additional materials before the next meeting, they could do that as well.
Thank you. Yep, it's a tough one. It was complicated. Thank you, everybody. The next item on our agenda tonight is I'm going to say that wrong, Regier?
Regier.
I just butchered it, I'm sorry. Regier property, the stream crossings, and I'll turn it over to Caroline for a brief overview. Thank you for being patient.
Yes, there's an easel over there, and there's an easel in the back. Just be careful, they're kind of wobbly. So I'll walk through and walk the board through what we're doing, and then if you're going to be in front of the podium talking at the drawings, you'll need to have a mic, but if you're going to stand behind it, you'll be fine. So this is something the board hasn't seen before. Most of what you do is site plan review. Every once in a while, you see something different, like we've had some docks on the Island District and in the shoreland, but that's about unique as it's been. Recently, we updated our shoreland zoning. We cleaned up what function goes to what board. We have some areas in Freeport, not many, that are in stream protection. It's a shoreland zoning regulation. Certain types of structures in the stream protection require review and approval from the project review board. In my 20 years, this is the first time the project review board has ever done anything in stream protection. So they're not here for a standard site plan review, they're here for a shoreland zoning permit. We recently updated the shoreland zoning ordinance. As you know, we took it out of the zoning ordinance, it's now standalone. At the same time, we did some updates to the coastal waters ordinance because we had to make sure both documents were consistent with state shoreland zoning minimum requirements. So if you go to the standalone shoreland zoning, there's a table of land uses, you look at it, you see piers, dock, wharf, other structures. Here we are, other structures. Requires PRB. You go to that section for the piers, docks, wharfs, and other structures. It says, oh, you use the standards of coastal waters ordinance, which is kind of what you have before you tonight. So we have to have the board look at this application based upon the standards in Article 13.8A of the Coastal Waters Ordinance. So you have findings based upon that. A lot of them actually pertain to piers, docks, and wharfs, and less the other structures. So you will see that a lot of them are NA. For example, he's not going to have to put a dock number on this structure because it doesn't fall under that. A lot of them are environmental. After you do that, it does cross-reference you back to Section 404, which in the shoreland zoning ordinance is the administration of permits. You might, when you look through this, have noticed that some of these standards sound familiar. In Section 602 site plan review, you have that very last standard of environmental considerations. Those 9 or so standards are actually shoreland standards. We just apply them to every project. This is the current version. I told you a couple months ago that those 9 standards, I think it's 9, yep, got updated. So these are those 9 standards. They're just broken down because of the uniqueness of this project. It goes into more detail than normal. So what the project itself, what the applicant has, we talked about this with a recent project down there. We have an urban impaired stream, part of which is on this applicant's residential property. There's 2 stream crossings that, as you can see from the photo, there's significant erosion issues in the watershed of the urban impaired stream. So the applicant has taken on this project to replace those 2 crossings in a different shape and format to improve the conditions in the watershed. One of them is going to be a rock ford, and the other one is going to be a bridge. They've been working with the town, they have been working with the DEP, and they've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers. DEP came back yesterday. Those are independent, but I still want to mention them, and said these are replacements. They won't need permitting from the DEP. There's still a process with Army Corps because there is some work in the stream, and the applicant has been working with Army Corps. Again, independent, but I do want to mention it to you guys. Rod is the landowner. He's been working with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation. They helped him do the plans for the 2 crossings. He can walk you through the details, and if you want to go through any of these standards in more details, we can do that as well.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
I'm a reviewer of the property on South Street. I'm going to reach around like this and hope that the microphone works and that, but I can get mic'd if I need to be. I'm down here. There's South Street, there's Route 1 up here, Varney Road over there. I'm going to ask that you visually add 2 overlays to this. One is a stream overlay. Down here, the bottom of South Street. Oh,
I can't hear you.
oh, okay.
Put that right up there. Just in your pocket. I get it right for you. Yep.
All right. Properties in South Street. There's South Street, Route 1, Varney Road over there. I bought a lot of Beans commercial property on Route 1. Please create 2 metal overlays. The Allen's Pond, the boatyard, there's a pumping station for the sewer district is down here. There's a stream called Concord Gully Brook, goes up, splits my property, and it continues through the dip in Varney Road and has its headwaters over in Pine Street. There are several tributaries for Concord Gully Brook. One is behind my field, going underneath West Street, the rebuilding of the dip of West Street that was done a couple years ago. One tributary goes up more or less where we are right now and actually picks up a drainage area across Route 1. The other tributary goes right up Old Concord Road and into Beans property. To that mental overlay, add a second overlay, which is the sewer district, because there is a 14-inch sewer main going from Route 1 more or less along the stream down to the pumping station at the bottom of Allen's Pond that was built between 75 and 76. And there is a more recent addition to the sewer line, again, more or less following this tributary, it was built in 89 to pick up the hotels down at Desert Road. So the issue is the confluence between the streams and the sewer district. There are 4 places in my property where streams cross over the buried sewer pipe. And we're going to talk about 2 of those tonight. I may be back in a month and talk about a 3rd one. I'm downstream of what you just talked about. And if you add to, for the last 40 years, the development uptown, the impervious areas, this is what happens. If you look at the crossing here, yes, right, going up toward Beans, when this sewer line was made in 75, 76, there were a couple of culverts put in, 1 meter diameter culverts, And at some point along the way, with the increased impervious surface in town, those culverts are bypassed. There's a new stream channel, and you can see where maybe 20 years ago, the sewer district, to protect where there's a line underneath here, the culverts are bypassed. This channel is cutting deeper and deeper, beginning to expose the sewer pipe. The sewer district dropped some rock cobble here, and more recently, the stream is cutting a new channel beside the rock cobble. It's active. There's active erosion around 2 long ago bypassed culverts. And this issue with the culverts having been bypassed, I am one hurricane away from the same thing happening with a crossing here below my house. This is the tributary going under West Street, where there is a single 1 meter diameter culvert. You can see the ends of the culvert are washing away. And the culvert is plugged before. There have been a couple times during heavy storms where the culvert plugged, that stream overflows, begins washing out material, and as I say, we're one heavy storm away from this culvert not being or ending up in the air, kind of like the other culverts were. So I need to be able to cross this to be able to have access to most of my property. I've worked with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a division of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've been able to not only get design guidance, but also get a cost share, so I'm not having to bear the whole cost of this. So there's a perfectly selfish motive, just so I can get to my property. There's also a huge public benefit. One is conceptual with regard to a change in how stormwater flows. There is a very different attitude toward culverts now than there used to be. And there's an effort around the state to remove culverts and actually have some kind of a natural stream bed so aquatic organisms can actually pass up them, which they can't on a culvert. And the other thing is, and both of the projects would create open bottoms, or natural bottoms, or stream beds. And the other thing is to say both sites we're talking about are subject right now to active erosion. It's material that ends up in the Harrisicot. So that's why the NRCS was willing to put federal money behind trying to make these fixes, just to stabilize to stop the erosion and stabilize these crossings. So the hope is to replace 2 crossings, each of which have either bypassed or rotted culverts. One crossing is going to have a bridge built. It'll be about it'll be a 17.5-foot opening, which is less than the distance across your dais. And the other crossing will be a rock ford. It won't be used very much. I need to be able to get a tractor across there to mow the sewer right away, and it gives the sewer district the ability to get machinery there if they need to, if there's an emergency. Because right now, if the sewer main along here were to have some kind of catastrophe, you basically can't get to it without either a helicopter or else first heavy equipment to be able to move stuff to be able to get to it. So those are the motives for this. There'll be a bridge built here and a rock ford built here. I know that you have in your submissions the plans for NRCS for all this. Everything has gone to the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. It has not been easy to work with the Maine DEP, because in January I had a note saying, because these are existing crossings, it's okay, no permitting is required. 3 weeks ago, I got a note saying a permit may be required, and that starts a whole chain of costs as well as delays. The delays are potentially fatal because NRCS rules require this work done. In-stream work has to be done during low flow times, July 15th to September 30th. I can't do work outside those windows. And when 3 weeks ago the note from the Maine DEP, a different staffer comes in saying a permit be required, that basically killed the project because of the schedule that be required. Yesterday I got a note from the DEP saying a permit is not required, go ahead. The other regulatory body I'm dealing with is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they have their own schedule. It has to do with a 30-day notification period for the 5 main tribes, as well as the Maine State Historic Commission. And that's in the works. I'm nearing the end of that notification period, and I don't have an approval from the Army Corps in writing. I can only say that my conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers staffer who is most familiar with Freeport, I have every reason to believe this is going to go forward easily with them. So at that point, what I'm hoping this evening ends with is an approval from you folks, from the Project Review Board, for this to go forward just with rewriting Freeport standards.
Okay. Great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Well thought out.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. It's very good. Nope, none. Jason?
No questions.
Okay, thanks.
You don't have anyone on Zoom anymore.
I was
You
about
only
to
have
ask.
people
Okay.
in the room.
Yep. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this application? No.
Want a motion?
Being none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
My motion is as follows. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the shoreland zoning permit for Rod Regier for 2 stream crossings at his residential property at 56 South Street, Tax Assessor Map 20, Lot 95, to be built substantially as proposed in submission dated July 9, 2022, finding that it meets the standards of Article 13.8A of the Town of Freeport Coastal Waters Ordinance and meets the standards of Section 404 of the Town of Freeport Shoreland Zoning Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives to the Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they're not in conflict with other stated conditions. And 2, prior to the start of any site work for the project, applicant obtain any applicable permits from the Freeport Code Enforcement Officer.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. I will do a roll call vote. Berger?
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Montleone?
Yes.
Reiki? Yes. Yankee?
Yes.
Donahue?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. It's unanimous. Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda tonight is item 4, persons wishing to address the board on any non-agenda items. Anybody have any? Cleared out? Yeah, cleared the room. Nope, nothing?
I'll just be annoying. And are there any conflicts with that 17th? Are we everyone good to go?
Yes, I believe I told you I will not be around on the 17th, before, during, or after the meeting.
Linda will be missed.
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's summer. Everyone's schedules change, so I'm just gonna keep annoying and asking.
I'm here.
I do expect some stuff to come in, so do plan on a meeting.
All right.
Maybe a large meeting.
Okay, so we'll plan to take December off, is that?
Sure.
We'll see what happens. Okay. If there's nothing else to discuss, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do we need to at least acknowledge the letters from the public or anything like that?
No, I noted for the record that we had received them.
Okay.
So moved that we adjourn.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Jim. Roll call vote, Berger.
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Montleone.
Yes.
Reiki.
Yes.
Yankee.
Yes.
Donahue.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you all.
Turn off your mics.
Recording stopped.
I always wait for the beginning.
No, because, I mean, technically speaking,